The variety came without warning. One moment, the colony world of Kepler-7 was alive with the sounds of children playing and farmers tending their crops. The next moment, the sky turned black with warships. They were massive vessels, each one larger than a city, and they descended through the clouds, like angry gods coming to punish the small creatures below. Commander Yuki Tanaka was stationed on a patrol cruiser when the first reports came in. She read the words on her screen 3 times before she believed them. Kepler-7 had gone silent. Then New Shanghai. Then Proxima Station. 12 human colonies fell in 6 months. 12 worlds reduced to ash and glass. The variety did not send messages. They did not make demands. They simply arrived and destroyed everything they found. Earth's military leaders gathered in emergency sessions. Admirals argued over battle plans. Politicians demanded action. The combined fleets of humanity assembled at Proxima Reach, the largest military force humans had ever put together. 300 warships waited in formation, their crews nervous but determined. Tanaka was there, commanding a small cruiser called the Wandering Star. The battle lasted 4 hours. It felt like 4 minutes. The variety arrived with a fleet twice the size of humanity's forces, and their weapons tore through human ships like they were made of paper. Tanaka watched her sister ship explode. She watched the flagship crack in half. She watched dozens of escape pods drift through space, only to be picked off one by variety fighters. The Wandering Star took heavy damage in the first wave. Half her crew was dead. The engines were failing. Tanaka made a choice that would haunt her for years. She ordered a retreat. While other ships fought and died around her, she ran. The Wandering Star limped away from the battlefield, bleeding air and fuel, carrying 42 survivors out of a crew of 300. They called it the worst defeat in human history. 90% of Earth's military was destroyed in a single afternoon. The admirals who survived retreated to Earth. The politicians began drafting surrender terms. The people of Earth looked up at the night sky and wondered when the variety would come for them. Tanaka spent the long journey back to Earth doing something strange. While her surviving crew members slept or cried or prayed, she gathered data. Every sensor reading from the battle, every piece of footage, every fragment of variety communication her ship had intercepted. She did not sleep for 3 days. She barely ate. She just watched the recordings again and again, looking for something that everyone else had missed. The variety were not gods. They were aliens. Powerful aliens, yes. Technologically superior aliens, certainly. But they were still just living creatures fighting a war. And in war, no one was perfect. Everyone made mistakes. Everyone had weaknesses. Tanaka was determined to find theirs. The first thing she noticed was their formations. The variety ships always arranged themselves in the same patterns. The same distances between vessels. The same angles of approach. They were precise. They were efficient. They were also completely predictable. Once she knew the pattern, she could tell exactly where each ship would move next. The second thing she noticed was their communication. Variety messages followed strict protocols. Each transmission had the same structure, the same timing, the same format. It was like they were following a rulebook that had never been changed. This meant their communications could be decoded. It also meant they could be faked. The third thing she noticed was their response to threats. When attacked, variety ships always responded with exactly the same amount of force. If you hit them with 10 missiles, they hit back with 30. If you hit them with 100, they hit back with 300. It was mathematical. It was consistent. It was also something that could be exploited. Tanaka presented her findings to the surviving military leadership. They listened politely and then ignored her. The war was over, they said. The only question now was how to negotiate a peace that would leave humanity with something. Some of them were already practicing the words they would say when they surrendered. Only one person took Tanaka seriously. Admiral Chen Wei-lin was old and tired and had lost 2 daughters at Proxima Reach. He had no reason to hope and every reason to despair. But when he looked at Tanaka's data, something changed in his eyes. He saw what she saw. The Virati were powerful, but they were also rigid. They had conquered 17 species before humanity, and they had done it the same way every time. They had never needed to adapt because nothing had ever challenged them. "You're talking about fighting back," Chun said. "It was not a question." "I'm talking about fighting smart," Tanaka replied. "They're bigger than us. They're stronger than us. Their technology is better than ours. But they don't know how to think. They just follow their rules. And rules can be broken." Chun was quiet for a long time. Then he reached into his desk and pulled out a data chip. On it were the access codes to every piece of human infrastructure in Virati-controlled space. Abandoned stations, dead satellites, destroyed colonies. Everything that humanity had left behind when they fled. "If you're going to fight like rats," he said, handing her the chip, "at least fight with everything the rats left behind." Tanaka took the chip. In that moment, the war changed. It was no longer about fleet battles and superior firepower. It was about something else entirely. Something the Virati had never encountered before. Something called cunning. The council chamber in Geneva was full of important people. Presidents and prime ministers. Generals and admirals. Scientists and diplomats. They sat around a great circular table, arguing about the best way to surrender. Some wanted to offer tribute. Others suggested ceding territory. A few proposed giving up certain technologies in exchange for survival. No one talked about fighting back. Tanaka stood at the edge of the room, waiting for her turn to speak. She was not an important person. She was just a commander who had survived by running away. The only reason she was there at all was because Admiral Chun had insisted. He sat in his chair, old and quiet, watching the debate with tired eyes. When Tanaka finally presented her findings, the room went silent. She showed them the patterns in Virati behavior. She explained how their predictability could be exploited. She outlined a plan that did not require superior firepower. It required something humanity had in abundance, the ability to adapt. The council listened. Then they dismissed her. Her plan was called reckless. It was called desperate. It was called the fantasy of a traumatized officer who could not accept reality. The president of Earth thanked her for her service and suggested she take some time to rest. Tanaka left the council chamber with her shoulders straight and her jaw set. She had expected this. She had prepared for it. While the leaders of humanity argued about surrender terms, she would begin her own war. Admiral Chun met her in the hallway. He pressed something into her hand. It was a ship assignment. The Wandering Star had been repaired and given to her permanently. Along with it came a small crew of volunteers, other survivors, other officers who had been dismissed as damaged goods, other people who refused to give up. They gathered in a cargo bay on the outskirts of Earth's orbital ring. There were 53 of them in total. Engineers and pilots, communication specialists and weapons experts. A few scientists who had lost their labs when the colonies fell. They came from different countries and spoke different languages, but they all had one thing in common. They had all lost something to the Virati, and they all wanted it back. Tanaka stood before them and explained what she was planning. She did not hide the dangers. She did not promise victory. She told them the truth. They would be operating alone, without support from Earth's government. They would be fighting an enemy that had never been defeated. Most of them would probably die. Every single person stayed. The Ghost War began 3 weeks later. Tanaka led her small fleet into Varadi-controlled space, using back routes and hidden paths that the enemy had never bothered to patrol. Their first target was an abandoned communications relay near the ruins of New Shanghai. The Varadi had left it intact because it was useless to them. Their own communications technology was far superior, but the relay could still receive and transmit human signals. And more importantly, it could receive Varadi signals too. Tanaka's team spent 2 weeks learning the enemy's communication protocols. They mapped the frequencies. They decoded the encryption. They learned to understand the rigid structure of Varadi. Military messages. Then they sent their first fake message. It was simple. A routine patrol report from a sector that did not exist. The Varadi received it and logged it without question. Their system was not designed to doubt its own signals. If a message came through proper channels with proper formatting, it was treated as real. No verification. No questions. This was the crack in the wall. This was the weakness that Tanaka had been looking for. Over the following months, they expanded their operations. They activated dead satellites and turned them into listening posts. They converted debris fields into hidden weapons platforms, using the wreckage of destroyed human ships to hide bombs and mines. They made contact with colonists who had survived the attacks by going underground, teaching them to sabotage Varadi supply lines with improvised weapons. The Varadi did not understand what was happening. They were designed for conventional warfare. Their entire military structure was built around overwhelming force. When their supply depots exploded, they sent investigators. When their troop transports vanished, they increased patrols. When their communication networks became unreliable, they blamed technical failures. They could not conceive of an enemy that refused to fight fair. They could not imagine creatures weak enough to be conquered, but smart enough to be dangerous. Every species they had before had tried to match their strength. Humanity was the first to accept its weakness and use it as a weapon. Tanaka watched the Varadi grow frustrated from the safety of her hidden command post. They were powerful, but they were slow. Each decision had to move through their rigid chain of command. Each response followed predetermined protocols. By the time they reacted to one attack, she had already moved on to the next. The tide was turning, not through great battles or heroic stands, but through 1,000 small cuts, each one too minor to seem important, each one adding up to something the Varadi had never experienced before, something called attrition. The council back on Earth finally took notice. They sent a representative to meet with Tanaka, not to offer support, but to demand that she stop. Her actions were provoking the enemy, they said. Her attacks would bring Varadi revenge down on Earth. She was risking everything for nothing. Tanaka listened to their demands. Then she showed them the numbers. Supply convoys destroyed. Communication networks compromised. Enemy forces stretched thin across a dozen sectors. For the first time since the war began, the Varadi were not advancing. They were holding position. The representative returned to Earth with a new message. Commander Tanaka would not be stopping. And if the council wanted to help, they knew where to find her. The Ghost War lasted 18 months. During that time, Tanaka and her growing network of resistance fighters never won a single major battle. They could not afford to. Every time the Varadi brought their superior firepower to bear, they won. The trick was to never let them use it. Instead, the humans fought like shadows. They struck supply lines in the middle of the night and vanished before reinforcements arrived. They planted bombs in places the Varadi never thought to check. They used the enemy's own communication networks to spread confusion and fear. They turned the vastness of space into a weapon, hiding in the endless dark between stars. The Varadi commanders struggled to adapt. Their military doctrine had been perfected over thousands of years. It had defeated 17 species across dozens of star systems. It had never been questioned because it had never needed to be. But now it was failing, and they did not know why. The problem was built into their biology. The Varadi had evolved strict dominance hierarchies. Each individual knew their place. Each commander followed the orders of those above them. Creative thinking was not just discouraged. It was literally bred out of their military caste over countless generations. They could execute plans perfectly, but they could not invent new ones. Tanaka understood this better than anyone. She'd spent months studying their psychology, learning how they thought, identifying their blind spots. The Varadi were not stupid. They were just inflexible. And in a war where the rules kept changing, inflexibility was fatal. Her greatest victory came without firing a single shot. The Varadi fleet stationed at Saturn's orbit had been waiting for reinforcements for 3 months. They had sent request after request to their homeworld, asking for additional ships and supplies. What they did not know was that every message they received in response was a forgery created by Tanaka's communication specialists. The fake messages were perfect. They used proper protocols and correct encryption. They came through approved channels with appropriate authentication codes. They told the Varadi fleet to hold position and wait. Reinforcements were coming. Victory was assured. All they had to do was be patient. The Varadi commanders obeyed. They had no reason to doubt the messages. They had no framework for questioning orders from above. So they waited at Saturn for ships that would never arrive. While Tanaka's forces grew stronger and Earth's shipyards worked day and night to rebuild the human fleet, other victories followed. A Varadi patrol group was lured into an asteroid field that had been seeded with proximity mines. A major refueling station was destroyed when saboteurs on the surface overloaded its power core. A troop transport disappeared in deep space, its navigation systems corrupted by a virus that human hackers had inserted into the Varadi network. Each loss was small. Each loss was also documented and broadcast to every human settlement in the system. For the first time since the war began, people started to believe that victory was possible. Volunteers flooded into Tanaka's organization. Resources that had been hoarded for surrender negotiations were redirected to the war effort. The council in Geneva, which had dismissed Tanaka as a dreamer, began sending messages asking for updates. The Varadi noticed a change in human morale. They responded in the only way they knew how. They attacked Earth directly. A fleet of 50 warships appeared in orbit without warning, weapons charged and ready to fire. They demanded immediate and unconditional surrender. This was supposed to be the moment when humanity broke. The Varadi expected panic. They expected capitulation. They expected the same fear and submission that every other conquered species had shown when faced with overwhelming force. Instead, they got something else entirely. Earth's defense platforms opened fire. Missiles and energy beams shrieked up from the surface and rained down from orbital stations. The attack was not enough to destroy the Varadi fleet, but it was enough to surprise them. While their shields absorbed the assault, new ships appeared on their sensors. Human ships emerging from behind the moon. Dozens of them. It was not a real fleet. Most of them were decoys. Repurposed cargo vessels with weapon signatures painted onto their hulls. Civilian transports broadcasting fake military codes. Only a handful were actual warships, and they were small ones at that. But the Varadi did not know this. Their sensors told them they were facing a substantial enemy force, and their doctrine required them to respond accordingly. The battle that followed lasted 6 hours. It was messy and chaotic, and nothing like the clean engagement at Proxima Reach. Human ships attacked in waves, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. Decoys exploded in brilliant flashes, mimicking the destruction of real warships. Coordinated strikes focused fire on isolated Varadi vessels, overwhelming their shields through sustained bombardment. When it was over, the Varadi had lost 12 ships. Humanity had lost 7, plus all the decoys. It was not a decisive victory, but it was the first time humans had ever won a battle against the Varadi. The first time they had proven that the enemy could be hurt. The surviving Varadi ships retreated to Saturn to regroup. They sent urgent messages to their commanders, demanding reinforcements and new orders. The responses they received told them to hold position and wait. The humans were weak. Victory was assured. All they had to do was be patient. Tanaka smiled when she read those messages. Her people had written every one of them. The final battle came on a day that looked like any other. The human fleet emerged from Earth's orbital shipyards, smaller than the armada that had been destroyed at Proxima Reach, but infinitely more dangerous. Every ship carried veterans of the Ghost War. Every captain had spent months learning to fight smarter instead of harder. Every crew member understood that this was not a test of strength. It was a test of cunning. Commander Tanaka stood on the bridge of the Wandering Star, now the flagship of the Resistance. She watched the stars through the main viewport and thought about all the people who had died to bring them to this moment. All the colonists who had been burned. All the soldiers who had fallen. All the friends she had lost along the way. The Varadi fleet was waiting for them near Jupiter. Nearly 100 warships, still confident in their superior technology and numbers. They arranged themselves in perfect formation. The same formation they had used at Proxima Reach. The same formation they had used against every enemy they had ever faced. They did not expect the humans to win. They simply expected them to fight and die with dignity. The human ships did not form up for a traditional battle. Instead, they scattered. They spread out across millions of kilometers, moving in patterns that seemed random, but were actually carefully planned. The Varadi commanders watched with confusion. This was not how enemies were supposed to behave. Tanaka's voice came over every human communication channel. Her orders were simple. Do not engage the main fleet. Draw them into the killing grounds. Make them chase you. The Varadi took the bait. Their doctrine required them to pursue and destroy enemy vessels. They broke formation and followed the fleeing human ships, confident that they would catch and destroy them one by one. This was how wars were supposed to be fought. This was how they had always won. They did not realize they were being herded. Every escape route led toward predetermined kill zones. Every pursuit corridor had been prepared weeks in advance. The asteroid fields held mines and bombs that Tanaka's people had placed there months ago. I said. The navigation beacons broadcast subtly wrong positions, leading Varadi ships into each other's firing lines. The void of space, which had always been neutral, had become a weapon aimed directly at them. The first Varadi ship died when it followed a human cruiser into an asteroid field. The rocks around it suddenly came alive with explosions. Proximity mines, hidden among the debris, tore through its shields. Before it could recover, 3 human vessels appeared and finished it off with concentrated fire. The second ship died when its navigation computer led it directly into the path of its own allies. The resulting collision destroyed 2 warships in an instant. The humans had not fired a single shot. More deaths followed. More chaos. More confusion. The Varadi commanders tried to restore order, but their communications were compromised. Messages were delayed or altered. Orders contradicted each other. Units that tried to regroup found themselves walking into ambush. Then Tanaka played her final card. A card. Single transmission went out on the Varadi command frequency. It used the voice of their supreme commander, synthesized from hundreds of intercepted messages. It ordered an immediate withdrawal. A phantom invasion fleet was approaching the Varadi homeworld. All ships were to abandon the battle and return to defend their people. Half the Varadi fleet obeyed without question. They did not verify the order. They did not contact their actual commanders. They simply followed protocol, turned their ships around, and fled the battlefield. By the time the deception was discovered, they were too far away to return. The remaining ships were isolated and outnumbered for the first time in the war. Human vessels closed in from every direction, coordinating their attacks with precision that would have been impossible a year earlier. The Varadi fought bravely. They died bravely. But they died nonetheless. The battle lasted a week. When it was over, the Varadi fleet that had terrorized humanity was reduced to a handful of damaged ships fleeing toward the outer system. They left behind the wreckage of 73 warships and the bodies of thousands of their warriors. Humanity had won, not through superior firepower, not through brute force, through patience and planning, and a willingness to fight dirty when fighting clean meant losing. The peace negotiations took place 6 months later, aboard a neutral station in deep space. The Varadi sent their senior diplomat, a tall creature with cold eyes and a voice like grinding stone. Tanaka represented humanity, wearing her old commander's uniform with its patches and medals. The diplomat studied her for a long moment before speaking. He had questions. His species had conquered 17 others. They had never lost. They had never even come close to losing. What made humanity different? What did these small, fragile creatures possess that no one else had? Tanaka considered her answer carefully. She could have talked about tactics. She could have explained the strategic innovations that had turned the war around. She could have given a lecture on asymmetric warfare and the exploitation of rigid command structures. Instead, she told him the truth. Every colony the Varadi had burned had taught humanity something. Every ship they had destroyed had provided data. Every soldier they had killed had left behind friends and family who were desperate for revenge. The Varadi thought they were teaching humanity to fear them. In reality, they were teaching humanity exactly how to beat them. The diplomat was silent for a long time. Then he asked one more question. If the Varadi had won at Proxima Reach, if they had conquered Earth immediately, would humanity have ever fought back like this? Tanaka shook her head. Probably not. The Ghost War only happened because the Varadi gave humanity time to learn and adapt. They won every early battle so completely that they created the conditions for their own defeat. Their strength became their weakness. Their perfection became their doom. The treaty was signed that day. The Varadi withdrew from human space and never returned. In the years that followed, other species would ask how humanity had achieved the impossible. The answer was always the same. From ruined colonies to victorious fleets, humanity proved that cunning outshines brute force.